As I mentioned earlier in the show, the federal government has today confirmed that the port of Darwin, the only major port in the country's north and a significant strategic asset, is going to remain in the hands of a Chinese company with links to the CCP. Joining me now is the Australian Strategic Policy Institute's Michael Shoebridge. Michael, welcome. This report was produced by the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet and handed to the federal government 4 months ago. Why have they made this announcement today?
Well, Caleb, I'm with Strategic Analysis Australia now, but I think this review was deliberately on the go slow because even though the government could have been pretty confident PM&C were going to recommend no change because of the way the review was set up, there was still a little bit of doubt. So just putting it off and slow rolling it made a lot of sense. And putting it out now after Cheng Lei has been released sends a signal to Beijing that everything's looking good for that magic handshake moment between Prime Minister Albanese and Xi Jinping.
And congratulations on your move to Strategic Analysis Australia, by the way. It strikes me as odd that the Prime Minister, before he was Prime Minister 3 years ago, was talking very clearly about the fact that he thought this was an asset that should never have left Australian hands. It's an important strategic asset that we should have held on to. And then, of course, you know, for political reasons, further down the line, he says, oh, well, it's OK, we'll leave it in the hands of the Chinese. It is the only port, as I said, in the northern half of Australia. Why would we not just rip up this lease and bring it back into Australian hands, apart from political reasons?
Well, Caleb, I think you put your finger on it. It's our deepwater port in our north. It's the focus of Australian and US military activity. There's massive investment from the Americans into our north, including in Darwin. They built a $200 million fuel facility for their aircraft. And this port that's operated by this Chinese company is in the best piece of real estate on the best part of the harbour. It's getting in the way of this military corporation that's becoming more important.
And just explain the importance of the Port of Darwin as an asset. How much comes in, how much goes out? What is the value of it to us?
Well, it's the main port. Actually, it's a commercial port. It's been a loss-making endeavour for this Chinese company. And you've got to wonder, why do they want to keep losing money on this commercial port? Most of the military stuff is routed around that port. It's going to other developments in Darwin Harbour, which are far less useful. To get a decent-sized, even the offshore patrol vessels, into another part of Darwin Harbour, you've got to do dredging and use explosives to deepen the harbour. So they're sitting on the best piece of real estate and they're stopping us using it for our security.
Funny about that. Meanwhile, we've seen both US President Joe Biden and the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak go over to Israel this week. Obviously, it was post that blast near a hospital in Gaza. Now, when it came to that blast, Hamas immediately blamed Israel, but the evidence is pretty clear that it was actually a misfired rocket from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. But that didn't seem to stop many news outlets jumping to swallow the Hamas propaganda. And one of the results of that was that the summit that Biden was meant to have with leaders in the Middle East fell over. Just how important and what were the ramifications of that misinformation that was spread by Hamas?
Well, Caleb, you're right. It was very effective misinformation, and it played into a whole lot of prejudices where people want to walk politely past the mass murders by the Hamas terrorists inside Israel and scrutinise Israel for operating in ways that any military should be proud of. So the bigger effect is really to slow down the other Middle Eastern countries' acknowledgement that the big threat they all face is Iran. But really that that realisation will dawn on them. And the Hamas terrorist attacks only make that more obvious because they are an Iranian-sponsored group.
Indeed, and we know that a lot of Iranian money has come from the US, funnily enough, so the cycle goes round and round and round. Michael Shoebridge, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Callum.